Max Verstappen endures in his words, pretty useless start to the Mexico City Grand Prix as George Russell suffers a high-speed crash on what was a odd opening day in Mexico City. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined once again at this horrible hour of 1:30 a.m. in the morning over in England. It is, of course, lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, a very, very odd day, of course, for those who have missed today's action and are catching up using our F1 update. FP2 was effectively a pretty tyre test for 90 minutes, but it's been remarkable because despite the fact it was a 90-minute Pirelli tyre test for FP2, across the two sessions we've seen today, we've had 3 red flags, 2 pretty massive crashes, and obviously we'll start off with Red Bull and Max Verstappen because floor damage to start FP1, but more importantly, some sort of issue, it seems, with the power unit.
Yeah, let's just go back to that red flag that you just mentioned, that issue with the floor. Only a few minutes into the start of FP1, and we learned that apparently a piece of signage had fallen off a bridge. Max had run over it, and this caused damage to the floor. Now, we've got a major discrepancy, not for the first time, it has to be said, between Helmut Marko and Christian Horner. Helmut said that the floor was destroyed, and Christian said that the floor was repaired. So believe who you want with that one, folks. But that's just the way it goes within Red Bull these days. It seems black and white, white and black. We never quite know. So moving on, and as you say, Max performing reasonably okay. He finished the session, the FP1 session, before 0.8 of a second adrift of really good lap actually from George Russell in his Mercedes. And as you'll say, we'll get on to him in a moment. Yeah. However, 5 minutes from the end of FP1, he radio in to say that he was having problems with the power unit, that there was a strange noise. They called him in, and he didn't go out for the rest of that session. But as I said, there was only 5 minutes to go. During the intervening period between the 2 practice sessions, it was understood there was some kind of air valve fault within the power unit, it seems, that they believed they corrected. But as no sooner had Max gone back out at the start of FP2, that, as you say, was a 90-minute session held over pretty much for in-competition Pirelli tyre testing. And we'll touch on that a little bit because we don't want to elaborate too much on that. Needless to say, Max radioed in again to say he was having problems, same problems that he'd felt before, strange noise. They brought him in again. It was about that same time that George Russell had this massive crash. And as you say, we will look at that in detail in a moment. Again, repairs took place. Max went out just pretty much as the session restarted. There was a 23-minute delay for barrier repairs because of that crash. But again, no sooner had he gone out than no sooner had the problems reoccurred. In he came. This time, the problem was terminal. As you say, Nick, he described it as a pretty useless day, one to forget, again, unquoting him, and not much learned whatsoever across the 2 sessions. Only 14 meaningful laps that he managed to complete in FP1, and of those, not many were too relevant to the timesheets overall, and not a time set at all in FP2. So, for the most part, a day wasted, a day to forget for Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Not much learned, and there's going to be one hell of a stampede to get out of the garage for FP3, that's for sure, given everything that's taken place across these 2 sessions in Mexico City today.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from the opening day is do not miss FP3 because that is going to be absolutely chaotic. And also the big thing for Max now is whilst he's not concerned at all about any penalty or anything, he seems pretty confident Red Bull can fix it. The only part that Red Bull still has, Max still has in his engine pool is a new exhaust. So they've obviously got the choice, if they can't fix it, to go back to something in his pool or to take a gamble and take a penalty. But I guess the big pressure
I was just going to say that on that point, actually, Nick, just for any Max Verstappen fans wondering, there is a silver lining in the fact that Max was asked whether the issues with the power unit that he suffered today would lead to a penalty. And he said, no, we'll be all right. So quite clearly, they are going to, if they have to, they are going to revert to components within the pool should any changes be required. So no grid penalty for this Grand Prix, it would seem, at this stage anyway.
But what's really interesting is we even heard Joe Guan Yu complaining in FP2 of potentially some power unit problems for him as well. But we see in Mexico City, because of the altitude, just how high this circuit is above sea level, it's very common to see technical problems, power unit issues. And it seems on this case, it's something that obviously is going wrong with the Red Bull, because actually Sergio Perez on the other side of the garage, a pretty quiet day for him. So obviously something for Red Bull to look into. But let's discuss George Russell, because as you mentioned, topped FP1, which is really the only representative session we've actually had today because of the tyre test. But then in FP2, a pretty nasty crash measured at 30 Gs. And actually not just, a big crash, quite a scary one because of how close he came to missing the Tech Pro barrier, something that you've got to mention is going to be looked into, because he was only about 2 panels away from what would have been direct contact with a concrete wall.
Yeah, he took off at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez and took off in pretty spectacular fashion. For the high-speed sweep, you come out of a sharp turn 6 right-hander, head up the straight, and then you've got turn 7, 8, and 9 that are super high speed. And what happened is he bottomed out across a curb, going across turn 8, and that just basically sent his car into this 180-degree spin. He locked up, but in locking up, the car then spun back on itself and slammed sideways into a Tech Pro barrier. And as you say, there, but for the grace of God, just literally 10 meters before, he could have been into a concrete barrier rather than the Tech Pro one. And my goodness, that would have been one almighty impact. The one into the Tech Pro was bad enough because he literally buried the right-hand side of that W15 into that barrier. You could see that George was pretty much shaken by that one. He said himself he was winded. He was holding his ribs, and at the time we thought, oh, could this be, an issue? Obviously, he went to the medical centre, checked over. He is okay. He's free to carry on for the rest of this weekend. But yes, what George said specifically was, and this was quite reminiscent of what happened not only to his accident in qualifying 7 days previously for the United States Grand Prix, but also with regard to Lewis Hamilton in the United States Grand Prix itself on lap 3. The car was bouncing. Now, George says that he felt this car bouncing, and as he went over the curb, he couldn't catch it. And the combination of the two, the bouncing, the going over the curb, as I say, that forced the car to snap, and he couldn't catch it, and into the barrier he went. So these are big issues that Mercedes are going to have to concern themselves now with its car, because following on from what happened in Austin, to now have this, they're going to be pouring over that car and will be mightily concerned to make sure that it's going to be qualifying ready, race ready to get through both Saturday and Sunday without any further issues. So yeah, major concerns going on for Mercedes right now.
And of course, big repair job. Just to our viewers very quickly, if any of my words sound really weird, I did burn my tongue on a cup of coffee to keep me awake tonight. Let me know in the comment section below any recommendations of
to keep yourself
after last weekend. It's been a difficult one, but for any of us, for our viewers watching, perhaps in the UK or Europe, and have got any good methods to staying awake during these late sessions, please let me know in the comment section below. Just no energy drinks. That's my one rule.
No Red Bull,
really
folks.
useful. No, especially no Red Bull, no energy drinks at all. No Monster Energy, nothing. As little caffeine as possible, please. But I'm open to suggestions. Let's discuss another driver who had a pretty big crash in FP1. Alex Albon, of course, made contact with Ollie Behrman, who was sitting in for Charles Leclerc for FP1. Ferrari, of course, doing the mandatory rule of having to run a rookie driver across 2 FP1 sessions throughout a season. Ollie was in for Charles, and a big crash for Alex at turn 9, where obviously we saw Kevin Magnussen have a big shunt there last season.
Yeah, it was a strange one, because again, through that high-speed sweep that I just mentioned with regard to George Russell's accident, and on this occasion, Ollie, standing in for Charles Leclerc, had pulled over to one side. Obviously, Ferrari had told him there was a fast-charging car behind him. Now, Alex coming through turn 8, I think it was, caught sight of Ollie over to the right-hand side. Obviously would have braked, but in braking, obviously the car started to spin, and in starting to spinning, the right rear of his Williams then caught the front left of the Ferrari, and that sent Alex into a 360-degree spin. Spun once, spun twice, slap bang into the barriers, and that was again another pretty heavy hit. That one to such an extent that despite all of the gap in between FP1 and FP2, and despite the 90-minute session for FP2 given over for Pirelli's tyre test rather than the customary 60 minutes as we're used to, of course, Williams were unable to get Alex back out on track. So again, like George Russell, he's going to be another driver that's going to be itching to get out of that pit lane for FP3 and getting as many laps as he possibly can to get an understanding of this track, because he is another that's lost a significant amount of time across this day.
And of course, for Alex as well, it's resulted in a gearbox and an engine change. So just sums up how big the repair has been for Williams. But something that happened as a result of that incident, which we've got to mention because it is quite peculiar, is a 5-place grid drop for one of the F1 rookie drivers, Robert Schwartzman. I don't quite know when he will take that 5-place grid drop for overtaking another driver under the yellow flag, for obviously initially the yellow flag for Alex's crash, which then became a red flag. But that's a bit of a weird one. I don't think I've known that to happen in F1. A driver who is not a driver in F1 to get a 5-place grid drop, it's unusual.
That's the stewards applying the letter of the law, in all fairness to them. And boy, have we spoken about the stewards and the rule regulations over these past few updates and podcasts that we've done, Nick. Because obviously, bearing in mind everything that came out of the United States Grand Prix, of course. And obviously, we'll touch a little bit on McLaren's right to review in a few moments. But yes, not only overtook under yellow, but double yellow. And that was the significant one for the stewards. And of course, applying the letter of the regulations, the penalty, the automatic penalty, is a 5-place grid drop. In this instance, for the driver's next race. But obviously, Schwartzman isn't in F1, so it's a question of whatever his next race might be. And of course, he's not even competing in F2 these days. So,
when?
Who knows when that might be, as to what FIA sanctioned event he might be competing in, then that penalty is going to have to be applied. So very unusual circumstance for Robert on that one. But as I say, the stewards at least upholding the letter of the law on this occasion.
Well, I think for those who have got that happening on their F1 bingo cards for today, I take my hat off to you. Fair play. You mentioned it there, though. McLaren's right to review. Of course, I guess the big topic off track that's happened in the first couple of days of the Mexico City Grand Prix. And as you mentioned, McLaren has activated its right to review for Lando Norris's 5-second time penalty that saw him lose third place last weekend in Texas. Obviously gave Max Verstappen the podium position, and as a result allowed Max to increase his championship lead to 57 points. As of the time of recording this video at 1:30 a.m. UK time, so far that appeal, the verdict has not been heard, but actually the appeal itself has taken place.
Well, the initial right to review hearing has taken place.
The hearing, the right wording.
It's a very unusual one, this. So basically, McLaren has exercised its right to review, as you say, into that 5-second penalty. Now, so the stewards of the Mexico City Grand Prix this weekend will listen to McLaren's argument. And what McLaren must submit is something new and relevant that was not available to the stewards at the time at the United States Grand Prix when they handed out the penalty. Now, as we know, that penalty was handed out very swiftly. Bear in mind the incident took place on lap 52 of the 56 lap race
Yeah.
in Austin, that verdict came through before the checkered flag came down. So quite swift. We're talking a matter of 6-7 minutes that the stewards decided on that one. Now, we've seen in the aftermath, so much has been made of this, of Lando going around the outside, overtaking Max around the outside, having gone off at turn 12. One of the big talking points is, well, did Max force him off the track? And in turn, should he have earned a 5-second penalty because he forced Lando off the track? And as we saw with George Russell and Valtteri Bottas earlier in that race, George got a 5-second penalty for overtaking Valtteri, but he forced Valtteri off track at the same time. There's a lot that's gone into this over this past week, as we all know. So as I say, the evidence that McLaren has to submit has to be new and relevant that wasn't available to the stewards in the United States Grand Prix. If that is upheld and the stewards in Mexico agree, yes, the evidence is new and it is relevant and it is admissible, then there will be a separate hearing to determine what will then be the relevant or the necessary or the much needed outcome from this whole saga that we've had play out over this past week so far. So, as you say, Nick, it's 1:30 UK as we're recording this. That's 6:30 p.m. Mexico City time. So, at this stage, we know from past experience that these things can often spill over into the following day. So, it wouldn't surprise me, bearing in mind the time right now, that this actually does go into Saturday. You and I are already into Saturday, of course, as we record this. But yes, for the Mexico City GP stewards, into their Saturday. And hopefully we will get something, hopefully before qualifying, most certainly, hopefully before the race, because we surely can't drag on across the entirety of this weekend. So fingers crossed that something does come about on the Saturday in Mexico.
And of course, keep an eye on Racing News 365 for the results of the appeal, because as soon as we get them, they will be on the website. Ian, we've got to end by mentioning, of course, the Pirelli tyre test, 90 minutes. Max his day up is useless, but I think that's probably how a lot of the drivers would probably sum up the test. Of course, testing for next year's 3 softest compounds. 90 minutes. It did feel like quite a long time.
You think, Nick, it wasn't that long ago that practice sessions on Friday, FP1 and FP2 were always 90
Always
minutes,
90.
regardless of tyre testing or whatever. So we've just reverted back to an old-fashioned 90-minute format. But yes, as you say, just one of those sessions that Pirelli desperately has to run to get a good understanding of its tyres for next year. And as you say, it was having a look at the 3 softest compounds, trying to tweak them for next season, trying to make improvements. So there were performance runs, cars laden with 20 kilograms of fuel, and then long runs with cars laden with a full tank, 100 kilogram of fuel. The one offset here, and where this really affected, where George Russell's crash and the 23 minutes lost really played a significant part, that hampered 5 drivers in particular. Just to explain that in FP1, we had 5 rookie drivers, and they took over the cars of, it was Kimi Antonelli took over Lewis Hamilton's car at Mercedes, Ollie Behrman took over Charles Leclerc's car at Ferrari, and then we had
with Felipe
Pato
Award
for Fernando Alonso at Aston Martin, Pato Award for Lando Norris at McLaren, and then finally we had Robert Schwartzman for Zhou Guanyu at Stake. So those 5 F1 drivers that didn't take part in FP1 were allowed, of the 90 minutes of Pirelli tyre testing in FP2, 30 minutes of normal track running. However, because 23 minutes were lost for the repairs to the barriers following George Russell's crash, that meant that they were only effectively then allowed 7 minutes of normal running, and it was only towards the very end of FP2 did we see Lando, Lewis, Fernando slap on a set of normal medium tyres. And in fact, it was Lando Norris that actually improved on his runs on next year's Pirelli rubber with this year's set of mediums. They weren't allowed to run soft tyres, by the way, guys. They were only allowed a set of mediums. But even then, it was just one quick lap, given the lack of time because of all that time lost because of those barrier repairs.
And of course, for those who watched FP2, let us know in the comment section below what you thought of the session. Would you enjoy it? Let us know your thoughts if you think that perhaps Pirelli should keep the tyre testing for away from free practice sessions. It'd be really interesting to get your thoughts. Ian, I don't know how we're going to do this, but bold predictions for qualifying. Good luck. I'm just going to get out there. Liam Lawson, Q3. Daniel Ricciardo was pretty good there last season. Got a feeling that Liam will do the goods tomorrow. Well, today for us. What about you?
I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz. I felt he looked good in FP1. He was second quickest to George. And he, regardless of the fact it was a Pirelli tyre test, needless to say, he looked really solid across that entire session. Good pace on the performance tyres and good pace on long run as well. So for me, Carlos is looking good here, but as you say, Nick, flip a coin, mate. It could be absolutely anybody's come qualifying tomorrow because we just did not get a real appreciation as to who is where. Yeah. And obviously, you know there's going to be more to come from Max Verstappen, providing Red Bull managed to get on top of those power unit issues, of course, going into FP3 and qualifying on Saturday.
So to our viewers, good luck with bold predictions, but still let us know in the comment section below what you think is going to happen on Saturday. On top of that, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join Ian and I after qualifying for our next F1 update. See you later.
Take care, folks.